Yes, yes. Just a second.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to another session of Open Source Mentorship, and happy Diwali to all of you who had celebrated Diwali. And the Diwali or the holiday season has begun almost everywhere in Northern Hemisphere. So, with being in tune with the festive spirit, we thought of doing a bunch of sessions around children and education. 14th of November was also the National Children's Day in India. And before that, we had done an episode with a young tech team from Turkey who's working on neurodiverse education by creating an app, learning app based on AI for such students and parents. Continuing from that, today we have some amazing guests with us. We have Ramesh Balasundaram, who is the director of this NGO called Bal Utsav, headquartered in Bangalore, but they are operating in multiple states in India. They primarily work with students in government schools or private schools in urban poor neighborhoods or in rural neighborhoods, impacting the various aspects of education ecosystem that the children are utilizing for their everyday needs. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you
Welcome.
for having me over. Thank you.
We also have another brilliant guest with us today, and hopefully he will be making multiple appearances on the platform. His name is Harman Puri, and he's one of India's top influencers or evangelists. That is the term that I prefer to influencer for blockchain technologies. He's a consultant for blockchain startups across the world, and he's here to help us how we can include blockchain in some of the solutions that we discuss on this platform. Welcome, Harman.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. And definitely, I also prefer evangelist. Great word for that.
Excellent. Okay, so let's begin this now. If you have followed us in our previous sessions also, you will see that what I generally do is I share my screen and my iPad kind of pops up onto the screen. And then what we do is we ask our guest, the subject matter expert, to actually explain to us in their perspective what the challenges are in a particular domain, right? So today I'm going to do that. And Ramesh, we would love to hear from you as to what are the challenges that students in such in neighborhoods or economic strata that we discussed earlier face in India. And then probably we can extrapolate that to other parts of the world as well. So, yeah. It should be loading. The screen should be loading, but you can continue.
Right. So, a variety of things, Saurabh, really, right? Now, to set the perspective, and for all of them listening in today, wanted to just speak about the size of the issue that we're dealing with per se, right? Now, India has got close to about 15 lakh schools, right? 14.89 lakh schools, so say about 15 lakh schools overall, of which close to about 13 lakh schools are powered by the government, right? Which means the bulk of the children in India today go to a government school, right? Even if you remove the partially aided schools, we are still left with about 10.8 lakh schools, say about 11 lakhs, right? Now, 11 out of 15 still means that the bulk of India's children go there. And any change that we want to see, whether it's Startup India, Make in India, Digital India, typically the key ingredient for all of this is to be able to strengthen these schools and make these schools function. Right now, by excluding the bulk of India's children, we can't go out and see any success in any place. I mean, I'm not spelling doomsday, but typically just giving you the extent of the problem per se. Right, number one. Now, what is happening in these schools per se? Right, number one, the schools leave so much to be desired for. Right, we seem to have a very, very different kind of a yardstick for these schools versus some of the schools that many others go to. Right, so one is the urgent and important need to be able to reimagine this and make these schools functional, make these schools schools of choice so that we have more people going there and making sure that these schools are not just there, but they are thriving. Right? This is to basically set the context in place. Now, what are the things that are missing? A variety of pieces, right? And today, since we are speaking in the backdrop of children's education, and in the ability of being able to bring in technology and see how technology can bring a change, I would largely like to summarize or put this under 4 different buckets, right? How can technology really be used from a learning standpoint, right? Which is more child-centric. The second piece is how can technology today come as a help for anybody who's interested in the teaching space, right? And I'm not necessarily saying teachers, I'm just saying how can technology be used for learning? How can technology be used for teaching? More importantly, where can technology and how can technology today come along to deliver better administration in the education space for these 13 lakh schools that we're talking about, for these 15 lakh schools? And lastly, what can technology do so that we can advocate this better, spread the message better, and get the word out, right? So that we can see change, right? I would like to largely put my pieces of the conversation on these 4 blocks, and then we'll start breaking this in. Now, from the first part, the learning.
Ramesh, can you repeat the 4th part, please? I missed that. I'm
the
slow.
advocacy. The advocacy. How can we use technology to advocate?
Okay.
To advocate change, to increase awareness about this, right? And to also share what changes when the life of these children change and what doesn't change if they are left out, right? So for 4 different parts, and I think they complement each other very, very well. Right? So let's look at the learning parts per se, right? Now, a lot of it was slowly changing, but I think technology and learning kind of completely got into a leapfrog mode in 2020, not a direct consequence of the COVID wave and shutting down of schools that we saw, right? Technology adoption until then was fairly limited. There was resistance. There was resistance amongst children. There was resistance amongst families. There was even resistance amongst the teaching community on whether we should take technology, right? But certain things are best when it just breaks, because then you are able to go out and have a better solution in place. And the ability to start using technology, because there was no other choice, schools were shut down. And the ability to go out and use technology, I think, came as a boon for a big chunk of learners, right? Now, is this absolute? Do we need to completely switch to online learning? Is offline learning better? I mean, that debate continues, and both have their own merits and demerits. But I think what we have right now is a fabulous mechanism of being able to marry the best of both worlds, around, be able to pick the best of both the online world and the offline world, right? Content is available with MOOC becoming the way it is. I think the ability of saying I can't afford to buy a book has come down quite a bit. The best of universities, the government per se, are all making content available, and I think that's a great leveler to begin with. Number one. Number two is to be able to use platforms, either YouTube or the various other channels that are available. Even something as simple as a WhatsApp class that were thriving during the 2020-21 window, when COVID completely changed the way learning was being done. I mean, from as complicated as tools that we want to as simple, the ability to be able to use all of them and learn, right? Technology turned out to be a great leveler in all these places. And I think that's another great place. The third piece is just the amount, like I said, of MOOC and courses available now for free, right? Anybody who wants to learn can learn with no restriction on either cost, on resources, or otherwise. So from a learner's perspective, I think there's just so much that has changed for the good, right? All that we now need is a clear mechanism to ensure that we know the learning paths in place, because sometimes this amount of content can be overwhelming as well, right? There's just so much content there. I don't know where to start, where to end, where after A, where do I go? I mean, what is my point B in my learning journey, so on and so forth, right? Now that's one of the challenges we still need to tide through. But I think net, the way technology has changed and the way technology has been able to bring about this learning journey is just phenomenal, right? Especially over the last 3 years, and the adoption of technology is only kept going up. And all of this now I'm speaking from a learner's perspective. Yes, Saurabh, you had a question.
Yeah. So Ramesh, I mean, this is exactly the challenge most of the learners face, right? Like which content to go for, which platform to go for. Like you have worked with so many schools and teachers. Is there an informal way in which the teachers and the students and the parents maybe are coming to some conclusion where they agree upon the fact that, okay, this content is good and you should, move away from this type of content, or this platform is good and move away from this platform. This platform uses less data, this platform uses more data. I mean, I don't know. Is there anything on those lines which is happening?
Good question, Saurabh. So awareness levels are picking up. I don't think a model has arrived as yet, right? Because everybody is still at very, very different stages of adoption per se, right? Now in the urban setup, the adoption is much higher to technology, but so is the resistance, because especially with higher children in higher schools, the high school children, the way they're using technology is not limited to learning alone. And therefore, there is a lot more resistance that's coming in both from the parents and the teachers, saying the moment we give them data and we give them unlimited data and a personal device, is this device and technology being used only for learning becomes a question, right? So adoption is higher, but so is resistance in urban India. At least that seems to be the large trend that we are picking up. Right? In rural, they are starved for information, right? It is still a lot more new, and their focus on being able to use technology for what it is and what else it can do is limited, right? So they are going out and saying, hey, I have a phone. I've been unfortunately at a situation where, let's say, teachers are out there or teachers are unable to make it to school. So my learning has been hampered. This has come as a great boon. So can I go out and learn and learn better? So that's like the adoption rates are much different. The penetration is much higher in rural, therefore, right? And therefore the absorption and the ability to be able to use technology and learning for what it is and what it is not meant to be is quite clearly differentiated in there, and that's a great start point.
So, Harman, I mean, I think I would want you to come into this, because I can clearly see that there is a need for some kind of a mechanism which is transparent to actually talk about which content works, what best practices work, what things can be used on the device. Maybe there's a way of controlling the use of the device for educational purposes. I don't know. So please come in with blockchain over there.
No, absolutely. So just, hearing different points that Ramesh was mentioning, especially related to the challenges being faced in different areas in education. Blockchain like potentially can come anywhere, right? But just to make it more precise. So the current conversation that was going on in terms of authenticity and, like which learning path to take, or more specifically, which teacher to trust, right? So let me ask you one simple question. How many times have you thought that why is this teacher so underrated? He's such a good teacher. They have such vast knowledge, but not many people know or trust them. While the other person with good marketing tactics and good, other initiatives, they are getting a lot of growth overall. So that's the kind of place where I believe, or even I have seen blockchain come in a lot. Think about it in terms of authentic reviews. Right now, if you go to Udemy, you go for the top reviewed platform. like, okay, this has 5 stars, 4.5 stars, it's done by 2000 people, and how many of those people you actually know, or you can trust that these are authentic people, right? So digital space right now can manipulate us very easily, and that is one of the biggest reasons that online resources, while, as Ramesh mentioned, that content is abundant, right? But the right content or the quality content along with the right path, that is not being followed because of these lack of trust, in a sense, or a lack of transparency, which actually is getting the right rating and all. So that is one part. uh, Before getting more into how this happens, we cannot get into the details of blockchain per se, but to overall understand, as you rightly mentioned, number one, trust and transparency, that are the main things that blockchain can bring into this picture. While I won't get into the technology, when we see any network or any ecosystem or any environment, trust and transparency, integrity, ownership, these are a simple, few keywords that need to be addressed. For example, in this education system right now, I worked with a company back in 2021 that was focusing on distributing funds to the educational institutes. That was helping students get loans through blockchain technology and making sure that those funds are only being used to get the education and resources, not for any other purpose. That's the biggest concern that there is, right? So these are the kind of areas where blockchain come in. For like, just to take an example, for example, government distributes a lot of funds for the infrastructure improvement, and not getting into the intricacies of that, we all know how many, how much of those funds get to the schools and colleges in actual sense. So that is a kind of system where blockchain can come in. What blockchain can do is track each and every penny, where it is coming from, where it is going, and how it is being utilized. So in essence, blockchain maintains an immutable record of transactions and a transparency of where the funds have been routed from at every step of the supply chain. And that record cannot be altered by anyone or by any single entity, and it exists on the internet forever.
So let me just introduce all the viewers to the fact that Ramesh has actually consulted multiple governments, including government of Karnataka, for doing a lot of things. So Ramesh, what do you think about what just Harman just explained, using blockchain to maintain transparency, and can it be implemented in this problem statement, which teacher to trust? And teacher over here can be a person, content, platform, anything.
Yes, great, Saurabh. Yes, we can. We definitely can. Two pieces that I would like to highlight is the two pieces that we're going to be talking about going forward, right? Technology in teaching and technology in administration. I see far greater potential to be able to use something like blockchain in there, right? Like Harman was just mentioning. Now, disbursements of funds typically comes under the third category, which is the administration piece. We said we talk about learning, teaching, administration, and advocacy. So I'm going back to seeing a far more larger need in administration, right? Like Harman's already put a finger on what we can. There's just so much more that can be done. I'll speak of two possible areas where blockchain could possibly come in quite handy and to be able to take this up in a much larger way. Teaching, and I'll just touch upon the teaching part and then speak a little more about where these technological advancements can come in. Right now, for teachers, it's multifold. One, the fact that they've been able to go away from staring at a black screen in the classroom to maybe a black screen on their device. Right, so that's already a shift that they're making. It's not so easy to keep speaking while looking at a black screen without knowing how the others are responding, because they've just been, a lot of them are just used to looking at children's faces through their body language, can decipher and say what's working, what's not working, how much of the information is being received, how much is being understood, so on and so forth. So they're making those strides to be able to switch over. But some of the fabulous things that technology is now making possible for them is to have individual learning paths, which we could not have. Right now, for example, now in the same class, the three of us out here could be learning very, very differently. Right now, Saurabh could be learning very differently on the same session versus Harman versus Ramesh, all sitting through the same class, right? We've all spent, let's say, 5 hours doing the same course, but the understanding could be very different. Number one, we could all be at different stages of understanding, point number one. But we could also be at a very different mechanism of being able to learn differently. Like, one could be a visual learner, one could be could be a sensory learner, one could be learning through hearing, like, an auditory learner. So that's number one. Number two is, because all of us are still putting in 5 hours in school, which is how the most standardized format is with most schools, right? Now, so let's say Saurav is, I'm just giving you an example, and this is just a very hypothetical way of understanding it. Let's say Saurav is learning at, or is currently traveling at 30 kilometers per hour, right? Harman is doing this at 90, and Ramesh is at 60, right? Unfortunately, the current mechanism makes sure that all three of you are learning at my pace, right? Which means for Harman, it's going to be a lot more slower because he's already done this and boredom is going to set in. For Saurabh, it could be a situation where, listen, you know what, I have not learned my basics as yet, but you're forcing me to work at the pace of Ramesh, right? Which is quite unfortunate, right? And if we are only dependent on a traditional schooling mechanism, what usually happens is all three of us lose out. All three of us lose out because Saurabh feels his pace is very, very different and the class is moving faster. Harman feels the class is very slow and therefore stops concentrating or stops learning in the class. And Ramesh invariably realizes that out of the three of us, anyway, nobody's learning, so let me just join the game, right? So it's a very crazy problem to be sitting on, right? And I'm just giving the three of us in this example, but the ability to bring in learning paths, individualized learning paths is massive. And if we can keep this going at the school level, at the block level, at the district level, and at the state level, right? To be able to understand where each of them stand, right? And we have this mechanism being fed at the school. One, like Harman mentioned, we don't have to worry about this data being manipulated, but also we don't have to wait for an annual survey to come out at the end of every year to say that children in class 5 are not able to do class 2 maths, or class 7 children are not able to do class 2 English, right? This is almost like having a clear-cut understanding of where each one stands, and educators, educational institutions can step up, and the administration can step up and say, hey, you know what, this is where we are, this is where we are lacking, this is where we need to step up, and this need not be a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old data that we're looking at to make the decisions, right? So just quickly touching upon the ability to be able to bring in, let's say, elements of blockchain from a learning map standpoint, from an individualized learning calendar standpoint, and bring in the teaching element. But where I think we can see phenomenal success in a model like this is to be able to bring it in from the perspective of administration, right? Now, one of the biggest...
Before we go into administration, Ramesh, sorry to cutting you off.
Please.
I think there's a lot of application of AI which is possible over here. I've been working with on AI since last year June sometime, and I've seen tremendous possibilities. I've also seen certain solutions from the UK, the US, etc. What they do is, using AI, they are able to analyze data and quickly give the remedial solutions or suggestions to improve things. And because AI is not dependent, like if you customize an AI, which is exactly what the world is moving towards, then you don't even have to share data with the rest of the world. Your data within the organization is enough for the AI to actually do a lot of beautiful things.
That's where sorry to cut you, and that's exactly where technologies come together to make it much more efficient. Specifically for this very reason that you're talking about, that how AI can help in decision making, or can make this process much more effective. It needs the right inputs at the right time, authentic inputs at the right time, so that it can make those decisions. That's why even blockchain and AI together, that's the most beautiful application that I have researched on. And for this case particularly, it's perfect. So just to touch upon that case study that even Ramesh was talking about, in terms of that it's different for every student. what the essence of this whole situation is, how to democratize education rather than making it so centralized that only one entity or one individual who doesn't even remember what it feels like to sit in a classroom is making decision for the whole ecosystem, while there is no feedback loop, there is no democratization where individuals can contribute to the decision making. While that decision making is very difficult, that is where technology plays a role. When we
So-
still think about, yeah, yes, please.
No, go ahead, Arman, go ahead.
So when we still think about, this decision making, what comes to our mind is the intricacies of the existing processes, like the voting system. Like sabko ballot pe bithana, like everyone will come and vote. That is not going to happen. You cannot make decisions in every small areas by bringing everyone together. But that's where technology is. If everyone has a customer ID, simple, just like what you have in a bank, right? You have a customer ID, you have an application. If everyone has that accessibility that they can vote or maybe contribute their feedback or their decisions on an application simply with an authentic ID, that makes all the difference. You at least get to know what the people think and then make the decisions based on that. That's where AI comes even further. If actually 51% of the people or more than 50% of the population wants a change in the education system, along with the guidance of the policy makers and the other frameworks that are necessary, then it should be done fast, not in 10 years or 20 years when there is a need for another one, right? So
that raises a very valid point, Ramesh. In fact, I'm going to take a clue from what Harman just said. He pointed out something very important, that people at the grassroots, or people who are dealing with these situations on a daily basis, do they know more than the policy makers? And what do they know more? What do they do not understand? And how can their inputs be authentically, transparently reach the top or the decision makers, and not just based on a report which is generated, which might or might not be biased. How can those inputs be brought up? And again, I think this falls into the admin, using tech for admin part. So maybe we can begin with that if you want, or you can answer this question and then we can begin with that.
So a very interesting question, and what is clear is, yes, there is wisdom at both ends of the spectrum, right? There's wisdom both at the grassroots level, where you've got people teaching, because they seem to understand the actual challenges that they see on a day-to-day basis. For example, and slightly moving away from technology, right? What is the impact of, let's say, bringing in the Right to Education Act, bringing in a no detention policy, and stating that we still want to have learning outcomes, right? Now, these three are actually contradictory at some level, right? Because you're saying, listen, you know what, whether you clear your lessons or not, you're going to move from class 1 to class 2, class 2 to class 3, so on and so forth, right? It doesn't matter whether you come to school, it doesn't matter whether you're learning, because the no detention policy has been removed, right? Now, in spirit, the no detention policy is made very well, right? The idea is that it should not be used to harass somebody or to deny somebody an opportunity. But in reality, how is this typically turning out to be, for example, right? When somebody doesn't show up in school, right, and has local support, either as a community or because they're involved in the local administration, it's quite possible that they don't even show up at school or show up in school lesser number of days than they should, down, and still end up going from one class to another, assuming that they're getting educated, right? And at the end of 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, what you realize is they are neither educated nor skilled, right? But they've on paper been around at the school, right? So there is wisdom at the grassroots level for sure to understand what's working and what's not working, and usually you're not taking them into consideration while making larger decisions. But you also have at the other end of the spectrum decision making, which is now more, let's say, in the last few years at schools, for example, you don't see corporal punishment being used, right? Because at one point of time, a few decades ago, it was quite a given to be able to see that a teacher walking into a school with a cane in their hand, right? Now that's almost becoming non-existent in schools, right? So there is great intent at the top to say, listen, we need to do away with that. We need to bring in an element of empathy. We need to become a little more humane. But currently, what's happening is there is no mechanism to feed this information going back and forth, right? And the other piece, and I'm going to just touch upon the point that Harman also made, is while we've got data and we've got artificial intelligence, where we could possibly see some great inputs coming in from using blockchain is to ensure that the data that's being used is not being manipulated, right?
Yes.
Now, for example, we usually, at one point of time, I think 10 years ago, it was a very interesting, and unfortunately, some of them still do this, to be able to have smart schools was the cool buzzword, right? So everybody went out and started putting out TVs in school, right? This is about 10 years ago. At that point of time, there was no data to see whether this was being used or not, right? So they evolved the mechanism, and they said every school was being gauged upon how many hours they're using the TV, right? They're saying, okay, I've put 2 TVs in your school. How many hours are they using this? Now, and this is where the difference between a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach comes together, right? So at the government level, you're signing an MOU saying, okay, 1,000 of our schools are going to get digitized. We're going to have smart TVs in the school, content, and stuff like that. At the school level, you're asking them for a report saying, hey, listen, you know what? Tell me how many hours are we using. And in many schools, and this is about a decade ago, we started realizing that the teachers were turning on the TV at 5 in the evening when they're leaving for home and keeping the TV on till 8 in the morning, right? Because all that you were trying to see is, was the TV turned on or not, right? So it's basically on autoplay. And they're saying, hey, we've got 16 hours of usage, right? Now, what we could change today, right, is let's say you build in an element of AI and blockchain into this in the schools. You're able to say, hey, listen, you know what? Let's say class 6, we are teaching photosynthesis, and photosynthesis has to be done over a 90-minute window. I'm just giving you a very hypothetical example, right? In 90 minutes, how much did, let's say, Saurabh take to teach this? Did he take 120 minutes or did he take 60 minutes, right? And soon after that, if you can have an AI-powered tests that we are taking up, right? Now you know that when Saurabh finished this class in 60 minutes, right? What was the learning outcome? How many of them understood it? How many of them didn't understand it? And then to bring in the blockchain element so that manipulation of data is not around it, right? So it doesn't look like one school is doing well, one isn't doing well, and you're looking at real case scenarios where you're trying to understand which teacher is actually teaching this well, who isn't. And if you've got a fabulous teacher, let's say, doing great with teaching photosynthesis, bring them over, put that video out there for everybody to consume, right? So whether the person is teaching in a particular Gram Panchayat, we could end up having the same being learned all over the taluk, all over the district, and all over the state, right? So the ability to be able to marry some of these amazing technologies together and see the larger piece, like I said, this was just one of the examples, bringing in the machine learning and the blockchain mechanism, but also to ensure that to make sure that both ends of the spectrum are seeing the same data. Now, one of the biggest challenges we are looking at, and that's what I wanted to speak a little on administration, is nationally, right? And the states are no different. We are looking at dated information, right? Now, all that we are talking about right now is the possibilities, right? We're talking of machine learning, we're talking of artificial intelligence, we're talking of blockchain, and saying, hey, all of this is available. There are some schools in India, not the government schools, but some schools in India that are even trying to say, hey, can I have a VR-powered laboratory in school? Why do I need to have a large-size physics laboratory in the school where only 30 people can come at a time? Can we perhaps use a virtual reality instead, right? So we are using something like VR at one end of the spectrum, and some of the schools are experimenting with that. And the other end of the spectrum, we are still delivering classes on WhatsApp, right?
Exactly.
So they are, and we can call both of them technology. We're calling both of them digital, but there is a wide variety of difference between the two spectrums that we're talking about here, right?
I would just like to add over here, you're absolutely right about this. In fact, last year, I mentored a team from Algeria in Northern Africa. And what they had come up with was, like, the leader of the team, she was extremely passionate about her idea because she had gone through that when she was in school. What she had gone through in school was that they were not allowed to do a lot of chemistry experiments in their chemistry labs. The reason for that, because what the school said was that you guys come and you use a lot of equipment, and a lot of equipment gets damaged or broken, because kids are kids, right? They are going to do that. So the school just said, so we are just not allowing any one of you to go to the lab and do it. Now you would ask, why is the school doing that? The reason for that was because the raw materials for the chemistry lab were not easily available to schools. So to replace those existing beakers or some chemical agents and all that was extremely tough for the school. Now she faced that, the leader, and then that's why she said, why don't we help both the schools and the students at the same time by creating a simulated chemistry lab? So they created a virtual chemistry lab wherein the kids would have to drag and drop things and see whether the chemical reaction is successful or not. And only once they cross that level were they actually allowed to do real time physical experiments in the lab, right? And this is exactly one of the solutions which will help both the school and the student. So I thought I'll just share that story just to add to the flavor of this wonderful conversation.
Wonderful.
And just to add to that, while that solution is quite innovative and like proper solution, that is right, but for a country like India, it's not at all possible to do that at the grassroots level, like for the kind of small the number of schools that Ramesh mentioned. I don't have any idea about that, but the huge number of schools and colleges, it's not at all feasible to do it in a shorter time, right? It takes a lot of years to get to that level. So in the meantime, how the process can overall be streamlined is through technology. Like in the example that you gave, for example, a beaker that's broken, you have to replace that. What a school has to do is put in a request. That request goes higher, then goes higher, then goes higher, and then eventually maybe a reply comes after a year or two, and then the beaker gets replaced, right? So what we need to do right now is figure out where the technology can assist this decision making, enhance this decision making, and bring some visibility to the whole process, that where exactly we are lacking, what resources are needed to make sure that this journey of a student is not broken in between. Ramesh.
Excellent. I think this is the right time to move into what Ramesh has been trying to do for the last 20 minutes, but tech used for admin. Do you think, Ramesh, we should go into that now?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the biggest game changer, right? Like while we've spoken about technology for learning, technology for teaching, and all of them are important. I'm not going to deny it, but I think the biggest game changer will be when we can move more technology into administration, right? And why are we talking about this? Exactly like what you just spoke about, right? Now, Saurabh, you mentioned about having mentored this group who understands there is a real problem, who understands that there is a possible solution, and it's a great solution to start with, right? But also to take off from what Harman said, right? Why is it not going to be easy for us to be able to implement it in a country like India as yet? Is for a variety of reasons. Number one, and here's where I want to draw attention to all the listeners in here, right? The way we are currently functioning is we are looking at dated information, right? Right through, and I'm talking about this at the national level and at the state level, we do not have real-time data. We don't, right? The earliest data we are looking at is 2 years old. Right? So you're making decisions on a data which is 2 years old. And then you're taking 3 to 5 years to make changes to the data around or to act on the inputs from that data, which means by the time the solution arrives, the earliest you're going to be able to look at is 5 to 7 years. Right? Now, the beaker, right? Just a moment. The beaker example that we just spoke about is one of them. But let's get into a little more fundamental issue that we're looking at right now. How many classrooms do we have today? Right? Now, every year around this time of the year, the government puts out a data which talks about information that is 2 years old. So in 2023, you are saying that, hey, as of 2021, we are short of X number of teachers, Y number of schools, and Z number of, let's say, classrooms, right? So we are sitting in 23 November, and we're looking at 2021 data, right? Let's assume that we say, okay, as of 21, as of 2021, we are short of X number of teachers, Y number of schools. Now you go out and get into a bureaucratic process to be able to change this, right? So let's say you're building more schools, you start with land acquisition, right? You talk about putting budgets in place. We talk about arriving at the mechanism to go out and recruit teachers, right? What should be the eligibility criteria for the teachers? So all that discussions begins in 23 November, right? The earliest you're going to be able to see any change of this happen at the pace it currently works is about 2 to 3 years, right? So assuming that the administration is extremely efficient, the system is extremely efficient, right? You've got the approval, right, to be able to fill up the delta as of 2021, right? And then you start constructing. And let's assume again that we are extremely efficient and in 2 years we end up constructing schools, right? So by 2027 is when you are looking at a backfill of 2021 data, right? And how much of water has flown between now and then.
Yeah.
So in 27, we are looking up and saying, hey, you know what? We should have had X number of schools as of 2021, but we actually have only Y number of schools. So we need to play catch up, right? And by when have we been able to actually operationalize this? Sometime around 2027. And this is assuming that we are moving at our best possible pace, right? Number two, so if this is the case with schools, right, we also see elements of school therefore crumbling, right? Whether it's classrooms, whether it's a chemistry lab, whether it's a beaker in a chemistry lab, so on and so forth, right? Because we're looking at dated information, right? What we would like to do and where technology can come in, and this is where we looked at it both from an administration and the advocacy part, is can we move into real-time data, right? And is it possible that we move into a predictive data model, right? So can I say that as of November 2023, I need X number of classrooms, Y number of teachers, Z number of schools, right? And can we now look at it and say, in 2027, how many schools do I need? And can I start working on it proactively, right? And this can happen. This can happen if we can, one, get our data real time. Two, if we have blockchain in place so that we know how many schools are surviving, how many schools are not surviving, how many schools have children, how many schools don't have children, and put it out there, right? Now, one of the reasons, unfortunately, we are sitting on this mechanism is also politics.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if it is a 2-year-old data, right, by the time anybody even notices and realizes that there's a non-functional school that we need to pull the plug out of, right, you've already spent 2 years. And then you're spending another 2 years trying to advocate whether to shut down that school or not. Right. So there's an element of politics that comes in there. Right.
But then,
Ramesh, there is interest in keeping it that way. Yes, Saurabh.
Yeah. So you pointed out a very important thing, and then there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention over here. I was listening to a podcast wherein there is a think tank which helps members of parliaments and MLAs of various states to actually understand data better so that they can make quicker decisions. Apparently, Indian states are not very good at policy making at all, and the challenge is not that the intent is not there. No matter what kind of political party is at the helm, the intent is always there, but they don't have the right data to actually take it forward. They don't have the right insights. So this think tank, what it does is essentially is a consultant to all these MPs and MLAs, which are who are now making better decisions. So don't you think, like, if that MLA knew that this particular school has to be taken out of off the ventilator, and maybe those funds could be channelized somewhere else, and then they could, because they have this information beforehand, they could politicize it or make it in such a politically acceptable way that it also helps policy, at the same time also helps the politics that is involved with it? Don't you think that is possible?
In an ideal scenario, yes.
Okay.
In an ideal scenario, yes. And that is why I very carefully use the word politics in here, because there is a lot more politics at play, right? Point number one, what if they don't make the school, what if they don't shut down the school? Yes, the school is non-functional, but what if they don't shut it down, right? There is vote bank available there, right? And this vote bank could be because somebody from a particular caste had built this school 40 years ago, 100 years ago, and you don't want to typically move those people away. They could be a party loyalist, right? Or they could be an integral caste equation for the constituency that you come from. So there is no prize for not being able to shut this down. Point number one, right? If I keep it open and we are spending money, so what, right? And this is where, because we are not collectively looking at the data, this micromanagement is allowed to happen. Right? If we come up with a policy which says, listen, you know what, any school that's, let's give an example, any school that is got to 20 children or lower and is losing children at, let's say, 10% a year, or we come up with some mechanism, even if you say the average number of children in India is 100 children per school. So if you say, if you're losing more than 5 children in a year in a predictive fashion, we realize in 3 years the school is going to shut down, or the school has to be closed down. And therefore, you either pull up your socks and you make this functional, or be clear that this is going to close down, right? Just flipping the model from a reactive data understanding standpoint to being able to proactively see it can bring about that change. Point number one. Number two, with the MLAs and MPs, again, the challenge is there is no penalty for not acting on this. Right? Because neither are the votes coming from there, right? Nor is the money coming from there, right? Neither is MLA or MP going to be spending money on making the school functional or non-functional, right? Because it's all disintegrated and there is no umbrella data framework that we're looking at, right? We tend to allow some of these non-functional schools to survive, and sometimes survive for years, right? Because there is no data available and nobody's going to see it. And if at all anybody sees it, we come back and give an excuse saying, hey, you know what, this guy was an important constituent of our party. He was our party member at some point of time, or that the vote from that particular community is important, and therefore we will not shut it down. Right? It does not even make it to news. I mean, I'll stick my neck out in giving you some data just from Karnataka for you to be able to look at this. Right? Karnataka has got close to about 50,000 schools, right? 40,000 plus odd schools, and I'm talking just government schools, right? More than 3,600 schools in Karnataka as we speak right now, sorry, as of a year and a half ago, have under 10 children. 3,500 children, school upwards, right? Have under 10 children. We've not shut it down, right? More than 10,000 schools, which is 20% of Karnataka schools today, have under 20 children. Right? Not shut down. Because the moment you shut this down, this is going to make political news. This will be on the front page of the newspaper saying 20% of schools in Karnataka have shut down. Right? So it's easier sometimes not to speak about this. Right? Because otherwise this is going to call for attention.
But then this brings out another set of challenges, actually, because then again, I'll go back to the politician, and considering that politician an ideal, politician who wants to improve things. So there is one set of data which tells us that there are only 10 students studying in a few thousand schools, correct? But the other side of the equation might also be the fact that what about the total captive audience present over there, but which is not going to the school, which there is a potential, right, which is there. So then we need to create processes in order to bring those students. And that is where, the Tamil Nadu government is a pioneer in India, because in the 60s, they started the midday meal scheme, and now which is implemented throughout India, right? It was a genius move. That is the first part. The second part is, what about the voters themselves? Do they want a school over there? Why do they want the school? Why don't they want the school? Because that is primarily probably going to be the right incentive for the elected official to make a call whether to shut down that school or not, right? I'm just thinking out loud over here, and you've been on the ground, so you, just putting these things out there.
True. So the voters want it, but that opens up the next question saying, what is the perceived value of the school? Right? If the perceived value of the school is low, and I would rather have the child go to a private school in the neighborhood, and I feel that it's more aspirational to send my child there, right? Then I'm not concerned about this. Point number one. But the bigger issue is education, unfortunately, is not yet an issue on which people are voting.
Yeah.
Right. And therefore we are where we are. Right. The day you start voting based on education, I mean, there'll be a lot more change. But to make it simpler right now, the ability to how do we break out from this change? Right now, obviously there is a cycle to this, there is a pattern to this. How do we get out of this? Right. Number one, the data needs to become dynamic. Right. The data needs to be real time. The data needs to be proactive and predictive as much as we can. Point number one. Number two, this data should be manipulation free. And that's where we can expect mechanisms like blockchain to come in, right? So Saurabh is not unnecessarily, for example, as a principal or as a local, inflating the numbers, right? We've all seen elements like this in very, very simpler fashions. I mean, it may not be as exhaustive, but even in simpler mechanisms, when you linked Aadhaar to student ID, the number of beneficiaries of midday meal schemes came down, right? The moment you linked Aadhaar to the eggs being given in a school, right? You realize that there's a scam in there, right? In every state that you could possibly think about, right? So one, even the little data that we have and the ability to be able to combine data has given us fabulous results, right? Now, this will be aspirational for us to be able to take it on, where we move from looking at dated information and making our decisions to looking at predictive models and making a decision, right? In fact, last year for the Hindustan Times, we had written a post which said, what should India be doing in 2047 from an education standpoint so that we are better prepared? Because until now, we've always been talking about what we were doing or how we were short of 3 years ago. So we said, can we switch the lens and say, 25 years from now, where do we need to be and how do we start putting this together, right? And that's a massive change in lens. Our elected representatives are also making that switch. It's new for them, right? There is intent, at least from all the political parties that we work with, because our schools are spread across states, across governments who are at the helm of affairs. There is clearly intent, right? I haven't seen a single government as yet who says, I'm not interested in what you're saying, or I'm not interested in bringing about a change in the school education system, right? One, the system itself is complex. Two, for many decades now, we've been looking at old information, right? So therefore, to be able to even understand that a possibility like this could come up, where you could just start getting predictive, right? And then saying, we will now, because we have predictive numbers, we can work backwards and start working today for what we need 5 years ago, is a transformational change that will happen. I'm quite sure that we're going to start seeing this in the next few years, because we are already doing this with a variety of governments. But is it happening as we speak right now? Unfortunately.
So right? You brought in a very interesting thought experiment over here. What would India need in 2047 from an education perspective? I was talking to this really experienced civil engineer who's worked in the Indian Army in all kinds of locations and postings. And he was just telling me, he's a retired colonel, and he was telling me that, an urban planner, a civil engineer, an urban planner will always think from a 100-year perspective. And that is how they design cities. But the challenge with India is that when they decided to, when they designed cities in the 50s and 60s, which were essentially based on the models created by the British in the late 1800s, they could never really predict the kind of growth that India would witness. And so some of the challenges that we see in our infrastructural problems is because, as you said, 21 data being talked about in 23 and then being implemented in 27. Similar things did happen for infrastructure as well. But then the increase in population was kind of, could not have been predicted in the 50s and 60s when they designed the cities that we live in India today, right? So do you think that can be now reduced? The unpredictability, the uncertainty of India's growth and India's education requirements. And this is a question to both of you, Harman and Ramesh.
So, before Ramesh adds a qualitative, more in-depth analysis to that with his experience, I'll just touch upon a point here what I believe the reason for this kind of neglect or a very you can say easygoing approach to these initiatives is there is no responsibility, there is no accountability. You cannot pinpoint who did what wrong, right? And to have that accountability, you need to have a record of data. You need to have a complete auditable record, what when happened, right? What when how, these three keywords that are there, and everyone can see that. And as Ramesh mentioned in the previous conversation as well, like having the right data, or data that is not manipulated, that is a key. And whichever initiative we talk about, no matter what, having that root cause, that back end secured, is the number one approach. Everything rest is built upon that, right? It's like the foundation that needs to be built strong. Otherwise, the whole building will fall. And that's where I think this new technologies are now offering a new perspective as well. That we don't have to trust a person just because they are saying it in a good fashion. We can trust data. And the person can act upon it whenever they will like. It's their choice. They'll be held responsible for that.
Okay, so Harman, do you think if we, let's say in an ideal world, we implement a lot of blockchain-based solutions, guaranteeing authentic data from different dimensions and different angles, do you think then we will be able to, reduce the unpredictability of a massive country like India?
Absolutely. I might be a little bit biased on that, but I definitely believe that, because eventually, apart from just being a record of data or immutable data or other technological concepts that keep coming up for blockchain, the main point is that it brings accountability, as you have written down, right, and highlighted that it brings accountability. And that's the number one thing. Like, I've worked in different use cases in supply chain across the world, where we implemented letter of credits and other kind of solutions on blockchain, how we can even include banks to transfer funds based on certain conditions that are fulfilled by smart contracts and other blockchain concepts. And I've seen how people become more responsible and processes get more effective. So there's a case study in India. One of the largest banks, I think ICICI, I don't remember the name, they implemented the first letter of credit. And the usually it took maybe a month or weeks to do that, and with blockchain it was done under an hour, right? So that's the kind of efficiency it brings, because everyone is now responsible. You cannot just sit on your desk and say that some document came to me, I'll look at it tomorrow, let's go to some dinner today or some lunch today, right? If you have a document and there is a timestamp that a particular authority received a document at 2 p.m., then they have to submit it by 5 p.m. They cannot just forgo it. And with the current system that is there and the previous system that was there, you can just change the log. You can say, I didn't receive it at 2 p.m. It came in next day, and then I did that. So that's the responsibility and accountability factor that's there. And with blockchain, that can definitely change. So it seems a bit too much to say that blockchain can change the whole country and the whole processes everywhere wherever it can be included, but it's actually true, because you are not changing any big thing. You are changing the most essential part, which is recording the data at the right time and making sure it stays that way, right? So it's
Very
a
interesting.
fundamental shift.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Ramesh, what would your comment be on this?
No, I'm very, very positive, Saurabh, that looks like this is something that will definitely see the light of the day sooner than what we would expect. See, the last, irrespective of the any political affiliation, right? The last 2 to 3 decades, we have seen India take a lot of strides, right? Now, while we're talking about everything that is broken, things that need to be mended, for far too long, I think we were also working on the broken window syndrome, right? You've just gotten used to it and you were letting it be. But what we've now seen, especially in the last couple of years, is some political will and action that follows, right? Now, while we were talking about, let's say, the engineering concepts and how cities were not planned, and that's definitely a problem that we're sitting with, we've also seen the way we've been able to adopt to UPI, right? And the way the penetration of UPI picked up, And today, not just something that has been made in India and is offered to the world, but to be able to get it out to every kirana store, uh, every telawala on the street, to be able to have a QR code. Yes, with all the volumes, we've been able to see some phenomenal penetration in there, right? The way we put together the vaccination mechanism, right? Now, while like the West was still writing out a sheet of paper on saying which vaccination we took, or each person took, we had an app by which you could go out and register for your vaccination, an app that will throw up a certificate of when you got vaccinated, which vaccination you took. So clearly the ability to be able to use technology and use technology at scale to be able to solve problems is something that we're already starting to see traces of. Right? Has it come into all the sectors that we would like for it? As yet, the answer is no. But I think one, there is political will. Two, the dynamics of the game have changed, right? From saying, hey, it's okay for me not to do it, to saying, what else could we do? I mean, clearly we could have still stuck around with using pen and paper to make a note of the vaccinations and the rollout of vaccinations, right? But there was intent, there was action on the ground, and we were able to see how things changed, right? UPI, again, massive game changer, and like this, we've got a whole bunch of pieces. So I think it's only a matter of time by which we are able to look at this, and therefore, that's a suggestion that I'm giving to most governments now. I'm saying keep your eye on 2047. Now you say in the next 25 years, what is it that we can do and what is it that we can't? Break it down into smaller milestones, longer milestones. But in 2047, when India hits 100 years of being an independent India, when Bharat arrives, I think we clearly need to be very different from the way we are doing right now. And all the suggestions that we are having here, I'm sure this chatter is being heard by a variety of people. And if it can ignite enough passion for them to follow this and be able to put it together, I think we have an answer in place.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we definitely have had a very, very insightful, thoughtful conversation. We've had so many things to work on. If you're a tech person, and if you want to create impact, there are a lot of sustainable business ideas over here. Primarily talking about how to make sure that the right data comes through, so to make better decisions at every level. So if you are somebody who wants to create impact, this is what we need right now. If you can do something around this using the latest digital technologies like blockchain, like AI, or maybe even other digital technologies like augmented reality, etc., go ahead, do it, because this is what we need. And as Ramesh rightly put it, you have a deadline till 2047, so you better start working towards it right now. Well, thank you both of you for joining in today. And Ramesh, I know we could only touch upon 2 of the 4 funnels that you had talked about. And if you want, we can do another one in the near future when we can find time to talk about the other 2 funnels as well. Thank you so much, both of you, to be here. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks, Saurabh. Thanks, Harman.